literally the city of Boston will be essentially closed down. There's no school for the kids in Boston. The Sports Hub is doing a live broadcast from Hurricanes from 10 to 2. So, I mean, if you got nothing to do in the morning, you might as well just pop in down to, the old Causeway area and enjoy yourself tomorrow and be safe. And it's going to be a little bit cooler than it is today as well. So we're here tonight all night long, and you just heard Joe Mazzulla. He was on with Zoe and Beetle, as we mentioned. And they asked him, hey, you been on a duck boat tour before? And he goes, well, yeah. Beginning of the year, I brought the coaches. We all went on it. And I'm a fan of team builders. Again, I've worked here now for 13 years or whatever it is. But I worked in tech and in automotive and all that before in my lifetime. So team builders are huge, right? Some people will rent out the bowling alley. Some people will rent out, Thompson Island or whatever. But it's a way to meet different people, different areas, etc. But I feel like when it comes to championship teams, isn't it all where and how it started? Like when you think about the '08 Celtics, everyone talks about their trip. Ubuntu, right? People still use that to this day. Well, the same thing happened with the Celtics team. I mean, the one I always go back to is Wick Grossbeck bringing Brad Stevens, who we're going to bring up in a minute here, but Brad Stevens and Joe Mazzulla in a room and saying there needs to be changes. And, I give Cerrone Battle credit for this one because he keeps telling me, well, if they went to the finals again, maybe there wouldn't have been as many changes. I don't know. It's up for debate, but I like the take, so I'm rolling with it. But Brad Stevens, I've heard this a couple of times now. The old GM of the Warriors recently said the MVP of the finals should be Brad Stevens. And I know he's not on the court. But Adam Himmelsbach of the Boston Globe, we had on a couple of weeks ago, mentions that Brad Stevens was letting loose a little bit. Because I know, people have called him like a Ned Flanders type, right? Heidely ho. What was the saying, Skaz, back in the day that it was like a famous night show saying? I forget what it was years back when they were talking about Brad Stevens.
Believe it was G. Willikers.
Oh, is that what it was? G. Willikers. Okay. I ran into those guys the other night. Did I tell you that? I was sharing the same room as them. And we talked soccer bets and ratings. So anyways, Joe Mazzulla, Brad Stevens sitting in a room together. Needed to be changes. There's no doubt about it. Brad Stevens, and someone called about this the other night, so I want to credit a listener. But is the game of basketball changing when it comes to math and analytics and all that stuff that everybody hates that they don't want to talk about? I personally think the Celtics were the best team in the NBA this year. And that's why they won. And I'm sure that they looked into it a little bit more, and with this group, with the analytics, these things can happen, and they all did. But Brad Stevens let loose a little bit, right? You think about him. This guy was at Butler, a small Indiana program, and brought them to the national championship. And they basically lost the game on a half-court shot. They almost went in. The Celtics went a little bit outside of the box and brought in this guy that built a system, right? Produced NBA players, Gordon Hayward being the biggest. There were others, Shelvin Mack and others, right? But he was a big part of that, built that program, came to the Celtics. They were a bridge team. That's exactly what they were. But he found his star player in Isaiah Thomas. They found other pieces in Jay Crowder and others, right? Avery Bradley was a veteran that they leaned on at the time. But Brad Stevens a big part of this, man. And a couple of years ago, he decided to go up top when Danny Ainge moved on. It was an agreement from everybody. And Austin Ainge, right? Wasn't he a big part of it as well? There was talks about who's going to be the next guy after Danny Ainge. It was Brad Stevens. And Himmelsbach wrote that he likes seeing him let loose a little bit. And this is something that Austin Ainge said. Everybody was at Big Night Live the other night while we were there. I didn't see them. I just saw their wives walking, and they were trying to come in the door that I was in. And I was like, no. But no, that's where the party's at, huh? Stevens has absolutely stayed out of the spotlight this year, right? He has stayed out of the spotlight. Danny Ainge was courtside every single game. He used to chirp at officials, right? He would come on the radio week in and week out and talk about the team and where they're going, and he did all that. And, now he's talking about how sweet this was. And, there was a bunch of reports came out today, too, about, like, Jeff Van Gundy and stuff like that. But Jeff Van Gundy might replace assistant head coach Charles Lee, who was hired to the Hornets, but he's now going to the Clippers. And they talked about how maybe they didn't want Van Gundy leapfrogging members of the coaching staff who have been a big part of this run. And now he's with the Clippers. And by the way, don't tell me that the Lakers hiring today of J.J. Redick wasn't curated for a while there when you look at that coaching staff, by the way. But Mike Zarin, right, vice president of basketball operations, crossed paths with Joe Mazzulla soon after the final buzzer, and Mazzulla's message was succinct. He said it took math and effort, which I know is going to piss people off. And we talked to Brian Barrett last night, and he's a huge stat guy for the Ringer, and take that for whatever it's worth. But he agrees that math is also a big part of this. But the ownership always said they were 110% behind Joe Mazzulla. But I do think, though, the fact that there was a guy who was once the coach of the team, who went up to the booth and knew the strengths of the team, the weaknesses of the team, and knew what moves to make, and now knows where they need to go. And quite frankly, Brad Stevens might have one of the easiest jobs in the NBA right now. Why not just re-sign everybody? I mean, are there really question marks about re-signing Drew Holiday? Are there question marks about actually re-signing Derek White? Why not extend a couple of guys? What about Al Horford? Would you just throw an extension at him? Why not? And he's already working out for the draft and looking at the next young guys, but he's hit on some big ones. Say what you want about Sam Hauser. He was one of the top players in the country coming out of college. Played at Virginia, won a national championship, one of the best three-point shooters. Dude goes undrafted. They make him an NBA player and an NBA champion. Brad's been doing that for years, whether it was a coach, and now he's doing it as an executive. And we don't know what Jordan Walsh is or Davison or any of these guys yet. Maybe they're next. Maybe they're the pieces they trade to acquire more talent to go for a repeat. But it is fair to say, one guy who stayed out of the spotlight is Brad Stevens, and he might be one of the biggest reasons why the Celtics will be celebrating another parade in Boston tomorrow.